It's August 30th, 2020. We're in Ivins, Utah. And I just want you to picture the heat for a moment. It's that dry, relentless desert heat that, it just sits on your chest.
Oppressive, yeah.
And the neighborhood we're in, it looks like it was pulled straight from a luxury real estate brochure.
Yeah.
You've got these stunning red rock vistas in the background, perfectly manicured lawns, and just absolute size.
Right. It's the kind of place where nothing bad is ever supposed to happen. It's engineered to feel safe.
Exactly. And then a back door open.
Well, a window, actually. He climbs out a window.
A window,
Yeah.
right. And out comes a 12. But this isn't a kid sneaking out to play with his friends. He runs to a neighbor's house. He knocks on the door. And when that neighbor opens it, the entire illusion of this perfect, affluent suburb just shatters instantly.
It does. Because the neighbor isn't looking at a normal kid. They're looking at a child who is emaciated. I mean,
Right.
we are talking skin and bones, deep, deep malnutrition.
And there's something else, something that just immediately signals that this is wrong.
Yeah. Most terrifyingly, he has duct tape wrapped around his ankles and wrists. And he doesn't ask for a phone. He doesn't ask for his parents. He asks for food and water.
That is the image that we really have to start with today. Because we are diving deep into the case of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. And you've probably seen the headlines: the YouTube mom, 8 passengers, the life coach.
Right, all the buzzwords.
But the headlines, frankly, were too sanitized. They couldn't possibly capture the systematic, the almost industrial scale dismantling of human beings that was happening inside that multi-million-dollar home.
Exactly. We're going to try and move past the true crime sensationalism and actually look at the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you brainwash a mother to torture her own children? How does a therapist weaponize the system, or the lack of a system, to build a cult?
And what actually happened inside that quote-unquote safe room that turned it into a prison?
This is a deep dive into the Connections program,
Yeah.
into the journals that documented every horrific act, and into the psychology of absolute total control.
The sources for this are heavy. I mean, we're talking police reports, body cam footage, personal journal, but they are absolutely necessary to understand the truth behind this perfect facade.
And the mission here, really, is to understand the how. How did two women, one a world-famous influencer and the other a respected professional, end up running what prosecutors, and this is their word, essentially called a concentration camp-like setting inside a luxury home?
So let's get into it. And I want to stay on that porch in Ivins for just another second, because the timeline here is so tight, tails harrow. The neighbor calls 911, the police arrive.
Right.
And the boy tells them something that I think is the key to unlocking the entire psychology. He admits he was tied up. He admits he was handcuffed. But what does he say about why?
He says he deserved it.
He deserved it.
That's the detail that just stops you cold. A 12-year-old boy bleeding from rope burns, literally starving, telling armed police officers that this was his fault. That is not just abuse. That is profound psychological conditioning.
It's proof.
It's proof that his entire reality had been completely rewritten.
It implies that the abuse was framed as some sort of moral correction, like, I am bad, therefore this pain is necessary for me to become good.
Precisely. And that's what led the police directly to the front door of Jodi Hildebrandt's house. Now, you have to keep in mind, this house is a fortress. It's over 10,000 square feet. It's worth $5.3 million. It just screams power and privacy.
So when the police knock, you'd expect... What? Panic? A lawyer? A refusal to even answer the door?
Maybe. But instead, we get Jodi Hildebrandt standing in the doorway, physically blocking the view and just arguing.
Yeah.
And she says something so bizarre that I had to rewind the body cam footage 3 times to make sure I heard her. She tells the officers, I have 5 turns.
I have 5 turns. What does that even mean? Is she talking about a board game? Is she talking about the turns in her driveway?
It sounds like her internal logic just leaking out into the real world. In her world, the world of connections. She made the rules. She dictated the reality.
So she's trying to control the police.
It seems like she was trying to enforce some kind of, procedural control over them, treating them like they were clients or children who had to follow her step. It shows a complete dissociation from the reality that she is no longer in charge.
She genuinely believes she could command law enforcement the same way she commanded her followers.
But of course, they don't play her game. They push past. They have probable cause. I mean, the boy on the neighbor's porch with duct tape on is the very definition of exigent circumstances.
No warrant needed at that point.
Not at all. So they start sweeping this massive house, and the reports describe it as echoing, sterile, huge, but it's not a home. And then they find the second child.
The 9-year-old girl, the
Yeah.
boy's sister.
Yes, and where they found her is so telling. This house is enormous, right? She could have been anywhere.
So where was she?
She was in a closet in an upstairs bedroom, and the police report specifically note she was sitting crisscross applesauce.
That detail, I mean, it sounds so innocent, like kindergarten story time, but in this context, it just gave me chills.
It's terrified compliance. She wasn't hiding under a bed or fighting. She was sitting in a position of waiting. She had likely been told to sit there, to not move, to be good.
So when the officers find her, she doesn't run to them for help.
No, she's paralyzed.
Yeah.
She's been taught that the outside world is the enemy, that police are part of the distortion. It takes a lot of gentle coaxing from the officers to get her to even come out, probably because she believes she's breaking a rule by being rescued.
And while this rescue is happening, other officers are finding the toolkit. And this is where we have to talk about the so-called medical supply, because they found something very, very specific. A mixture of honey and cayenne pepper.
Right. Now, if you go down certain, rabbit holes of alternative health online, you might find people talking about using honey for its antibacterial properties or cayenne for circulation.
Sure. Harmless on its own, maybe.
But in this house, the boy told them what it would put it on his...
On his open rope.
Yes. Just think about the chemistry of that for a second.
Yeah.
Cayenne pepper contains capsaicin. It's the chemical that makes peppers hot. When you put that on raw, abraded skin, it activates the pain receptors immediately. It would feel like liquid fire.
So it wasn't healing. It was never about healing. It was torture disguised as treatment.
It was an additional layer of punishment. The logic is so twisted. It's, you have a wound because you were bad, because you tried to escape, so we will treat it with something that causes excruciating pain to remind you of your badness.
It reinforces the core idea that pain is the only path to repentance.
Exactly. And then they go downstairs. They find the panic room, or what looks like a panic room. The officers see this heavy vault door. Jodi, of course, claims she forgot the code.
Which is just such a weak, transparent lie for someone who supposedly knows everything, who holds all the truth.
It's pure obstruction. But it's almost comical because one of the officers just tries the most obvious code in the world. He punches in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And it opens.
And the door opens. The banality of evil right there.
And inside, it's not a panic room for safety. It's a cell.
A concrete box. No furniture. Just ropes, handcuffs, and anchor points bolted into the floor. This wasn't a makeshift punishment corner in a basement. This was a purpose-built dungeon inside a luxury home. This is where the children were held.
This is the moment the handcuffs go on Ruby Franke and Jodi. But to really understand how we got to a dungeon in a mansion, we have to rewind and look at who women actually are. Because on paper, they were successful. They were religious, good members. Who is Jodi really?
Jodi is a chameleon. But you look at the source material from her past, the pattern was always there, just waiting for the right circumstances to flourish. She grew up LDS Latter-day Saints in a large family of 7. She served a mission in Puerto Rico back in the 90s.
Which, in that culture, is a very prestigious thing to do, right? Serving a mission.
It is. It shows dedication. It's a rite of passage. It confers a certain amount of spiritual authority. But we have accounts from her mission companion at the time, a woman named Laura Howells-Leavitt. And Laura describes a personality that is terrifyingly consistent with what we see decades later.
What did she say?
She says Jodi was incredibly controlling, even back then. She had this uncanny knack for making people feel worthless if they weren't as spiritual as she was. She'd create these little hierarchies of righteousness.
So she was weaponizing God way back in her early 20s.
Exactly. She used spirituality as a bludgeon. The logic is simple and impossible to argue with. I am closer to God than you, therefore I have authority over you. It's the ultimate trump card. If you disagree with me, you aren't arguing with Jodi, you're arguing with God himself.
So she comes back from her mission. Fast forward a bit, she builds a career.
She becomes a therapist. She focuses on addiction recovery. But in 2012, she hits a massive, massive wall. Her license is put on probation.
What did she do that was so bad that the board had to step in?
She broke the most cardinal rule of therapy, confidentiality. She was treating a client for what she diagnosed as pornography addiction. She took his private confessions, things he said in the absolute sanctity of a therapy session, and she went and discussed them with his university administrators and his local church bishops.
She outed him. She just nuked his entire life, his academic life, his spiritual life.
She destroyed his reputation. And when the licensing board called her on it, her defense was essentially that her moral duty to save him superseded her professional and legal duty to keep his secrets.
Wow.
She genuinely believed she answered to a higher power than the state licensing board of Utah.
That is a full-blown God complex. But here is the pivot that I think is so crucial for our listeners to understand. She gets her wrists slapped. She can't practice freely as a clinical therapist anymore, so she just rebrands. She becomes a life coach.
This is the regulatory loophole that allowed her entire connections empire to exist. Therapy is highly regulated. You have HIPAA, you have ethics boards, you have oversight. Life coaching, it's the Wild West. Anybody can hang a shingle on their door and call themselves a coach.
And they can charge whatever they want.
And they did. She started charging $175 an hour for sessions. But the real money wasn't in the one-on-one. It was in the group. $2,000 entry, constant training set. It became a subscription service for salvation.
And she was making a fortune.
A huge fortune. When police raided her closet, they found a duffel bag stuffed with $80,000 in cash.
$80,000 just sitting in a bag.
That's not money you're reporting to the IRS. That's tax evasion money. That's go-bag money. It just shows that this was an incredibly lucrative criminal enterprise. She was preying on desperate families who felt broken, telling them that traditional therapy was part of the system, part of the distortion, and only she had the capital T truth.
And that brings us to the perfect victim, or maybe the perfect accomplice.
Ruby Franke was, for a time, the undisputed queen of the mommy vlogger. Her channel, 8 Passengers, had over 2 million subscribers. I think at its peak, it had something like 1 billion views. She documented everything.
I remember seeing their videos years ago. They would just occasionally pop up in my... And it always seemed, I don't know, a little too curated, a little too perfect.
It was a highlight reel, a meticulously crafted image of a perfect Mormon family. But you have to imagine the pressure cooker she was living. You are literally monetizing your children's behavior. If the kids act out, if they're messy, if they're rebellious, it ruins the brand.
And as the kids got older, especially her teenage son, Chad, they started having opinions. They started resisting being on camera all the time.
And to Ruby, that wasn't just normal teenage rebellion. That was a direct threat to her identity and her business. It was a loss of control.
And this is where we see the early signs of her extreme parenting style before Jodi even comes into the picture. Remember the beanbag incident?
The infamous beanbag, where her son Chad lost his bedroom.
For how long?
For 7 months. He was forced to sleep on a beanbag in the living room for 7 months. And the crime was playing a prank on his little brother. Something incredibly minor.
And the internet went crazy over that.
They called it abuse, and rightly so. But instead of reflecting on her methods, Ruby got incredibly defensive. She felt persecuted. She felt like the world just didn't understand that she was trying to be a good mother, a righteous.
So she's feeling attacked. She's feeling misunderstood. She's losing control of her kids and her brain. And she goes looking for validation, and she finds Jodi Hildebrandt.
And Jodi didn't just validate her. Jodi gave her a whole philosophical and theological framework for her cruelty. She told Ruby, "You aren't abusive. You are righteous. The world is wrong. The internet is wrong. Your son is wrong. You need to double down, not back down."
It's the perfect toxic cocktail. Ruby had the massive platform and the deep-seated vulnerability. Jodi had the extremist ideology and the insatiable need to control.
And notice the rebrand that happens almost immediately. 8 Passengers shuts down, and Moms of Truth is born. It wasn't about the family anymore. It was about the ideology. It was a joint venture where Jodi essentially cannibalized Ruby's audience. She used Ruby as a megaphone to mainstream her extremism.
So let's drill down into that ideology, because truth is a nice word. Who doesn't want truth? But in the Connections program, truth didn't mean facts or reality.
No. In cult dynamics, we call this linguistic loading. They take common positive words and they redefine. In Jodi's system, truth meant Jodi's opinion, and the opposite of truth was distortion.
And distortion meant what?
Distortion meant literally anything Jodi disagreed with, any thought, any behavior, any feeling. If Jodi said the sky was green and you said, "No, it looks blue to me,"
then I'm living in distortion.
You're living in distortion. You are lying to yourself. And here's the hook. Because Jodi claimed to be a prophet, literally a mouthpiece for God on earth, living in distortion meant you weren't just mistaken. It meant you were possessed by the devil.
That escalates things from a simple disagreement to spiritual warfare instantly.
Correct. And this is how they neutralized anyone who might have stopped. We have to talk about Kevin Franke, Ruby's husband. He was a university professor, an educated man, and yet he allowed Jodi Hildebrandt to kick him out of his own house.
How? I mean, how do you convince a man to abandon his wife and 6 children to a woman like that?
You weaponize his own shame, you find a vulnerability, and you exploit it mercilessly. Jodi told Kevin he was sex addict. Now, when you look at the police reports and the statements later, his supposed addiction was things like finding another woman attractive or having looked at mild pornography years and years prior, essentially being a normal human male.
So she pathologized his heterosexuality. She made him feel like he was a predator just for having eyes.
She framed his normal biological drives as an existential danger to his family. The logic she presented was, if you truly love your wife and kids, you will leave them because you are unsafe. You are living in distortion, and your distortion will infect.
And he believed it. That's the scariest part. He bought it completely.
He spent over a year living in total isolation. No phone, no internet, no contact with his family, just studying Jodi's materials, trying to cure himself of being a human man. And meanwhile, Jodi moves into his house and takes total, absolute control of his wife and his children.
It's a coup, a quiet domestic coup.
And it wasn't a one-off. She did it to others. We have the testimony of Adam Steed, another former client. It was the exact same playbook. From day one, he was labeled a lust addict. He was told to isolate, to cut off his wife, to cut off the internet.
But he got out.
Fortunately, Adam woke up. He saw the cracks in the logic. He realized it was about control, not healing, and he got his family out. Kevin stayed in the fog until the handcuffs clicked on Ruby.
So the men are gone, the women have been radicalized into this shared delusion, and now the full focus of this twisted ideology turns to the children. This is where the concept of distortion becomes physically, criminally dangerous.
Because if a child is in distortion, and that could mean anything. They want a snack when it's not snack, or they miss their dad, or they just want a hug in Jodie's world. That isn't a child expressing a normal need. That is a demon manifesting through the child.
So you don't comfort the child? You don't feed the demon?
Exactly. You starve the demon to save the child's soul. You inflict pain on the physical body to drive out the evil spirit. They genuinely view the torture not as abuse, but as a necessary medical and spiritual intervention. They believe they were saving these kids' souls by breaking their bodies.
And we know this for a fact. We know this was their mindset because Ruby wrote it all down.
The journals. This is the smoking gun of the entire case.
Yeah.
Ruby kept meticulous, detailed journals, and she wrote about the abuse as if she were Marie Curie documenting a scientific breakthrough. She detailed the progress of the children based on how much pain they could endure.
Give us the specifics. What was actually happening day to day in that house of horrors?
It started with labor. In the middle of the St. George, Utah summer, we're talking 100, 110 degrees, the 12-year-old boy was forced to move rocks and boxes outside for hours and hours on end without water. This wasn't chores, forced punitive exertion designed to break him.
And if he slowed down, if he tried to rest.
Ruby wrote about using what she called a cactus poke. She would literally prod him with a cactus if he tried to rest in the shade. She wrote in her journal, and this is a direct quote from her thinking, "The demon stays in the shade." She was actively hunting him in the yard. Just picture that. A mother poking her emaciated son with a cactus because he is trying not to die of heat stroke.
That's medieval. It's just absolutely sadistic.
Then there was the trampoline. She forced him to jump on a black trampoline in the full sun for hours. The police forensics team, when they examined it, found calcium buildup on the trampoline.
Wait, explain that. Calcium buildup. What does that mean?
It's from sweat. He was sweating so profusely for so long, day after day, that the sweat was drying and layering over itself so many times that the minerals in his sweat, the calcium, the salt, actually crystallized on the black mat. It left a visible white residue. It's physical, forensic evidence of the duration and the sheer intensity of the torture he was enduring.
And when the forced labor didn't work, when the demon didn't leave his body.
That's when the restraints came. He tried to run away once and they caught him. After that, the abuse escalated dramatically. He was hogtied, handcuffs on his wrists, handcuffs on his ankles, and then they were connected behind his back.
That position, it restricts breathing. It puts incredible strain on the joint.
And they left him like that for hours, sometimes days at a time, on a hard floor.
And that, of course, leads to the wounds, the deep rope burns and cuff burns we saw when he escaped.
And that leads back to the cayenne pepper paste. They were creating a self-perpetuating cycle of pain to completely break his will. But the truly terrifying part is they had a plan to take it even further, what the investigators called the hot potato plan.
The Arizona documents, what was that all about?
Jodi had purchased a desolate, isolated piece of land in Arizona. She'd also bought tracts. The journals and other documents referred to a plan to move the children there and drop them like hot potatoes in the desert.
That sounds like a disposal plan. That doesn't sound like a relocation plan.
It sounds like a private concentration camp. They wanted to move the entire operation completely off-grid, where there were no neighbors to hear screams, no school officials to ask questions, and no police to do welfare check. If that boy had not escaped on August 30th, I truly believe we would be looking at a multiple homicide investigation right now. They were preparing to work these children to death in the middle of nowhere.
I want to pivot now to the psychology themselves we've talked about. But what was happening in their heads, specifically Jodi? Was she just a brilliant con artist, or was she genuinely...
It's likely a combination of malignant narcissism and profound religious delusion. Jodi reported to Ruby and others that she was seeing shadow figures. She claimed that demons were physically attacking her at night.
And she didn't keep that delusion to herself. She dragged Ruby into it.
Oh, completely. She made Ruby sleep in the same bed. She told Ruby, "I need you to protect me from the..." Now, just think about the power dynamic. And it creates what's known in psychology as a folie à deux, a shared mat. Ruby felt special. She wasn't just a follower anymore. She was the chosen protector of the prophet.
It isolates them from everyone else in the world. It becomes just the two of them against an army of darks.
They were the only two clean people in a world of filth. And Ruby, she was fully 100% converted, even after the arrest.
Right. Initially, she didn't see it as a rescue.
Not at all. In the early jail calls, Ruby genuinely thought the arrest was a test from God. She thought Satan was attacking them because they were so righteous and so close to the truth. She was writing letters to Jodi about how the angels would come and open the cell doors and they would be vindicated.
But at some point, something changed for Ruby. The spell broke.
Separation. It's a classic deprogramming technique. Once she was physically separated from Jodi's constant influence, the fog began to lift. She was away from the source of the delusion, and in her plea hearing, Ruby expressed what seemed to be genuine, profound remorse. She admitted she had been in a dark delusion. She took responsibility for following counsel that led her so far astray.
But Jodi, what was her reaction?
Zero remorse. Absolutely none. We have the transcripts of her jail calls to her family, and they're chilling. She compares herself to Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. She compares herself to Jesus Christ. She calls the whole thing a witch hunt.
So she's not just unrepentant, she's convinced she's a martyr.
She frames her imprisonment as a mission trip. She actually says in one call, "I'm not in a cage. I'm in a new congregation." She believes that God put her in prison to preach the gospel to the inmate.
That mindset makes her incredibly dangerous, permanently.
It does, because she's incapable of rehabilitation. You can't rehabilitate someone who believes their crimes were actually divine orders from God. As long as she has a voice, she will be a danger. She will try to recruit followers inside the prison system. She will never believe she did anything wrong.
They were both sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of 1 to 15. For people who don't know the Utah legal system, what does that actually mean in terms of time?
Utah uses what's called indeterminate sentencing. The judge gives a range, but it's the Board of Pardons and Parole that decides the actual time served. In this case, the judge made it very clear in his sentencing that he was recommending they serve the maximum time on each count consecutively. So it's effectively a 30-year sentence at minimum and possibly life, depending on what the board decides down the road.
And given Jodi's complete lack of remorse, I can't imagine a parole board ever letting...
It's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Maybe many, many years from now, if she continues on this path of deprogramming and can demonstrate that she is no longer a threat. But the damage is done. Those children have to live with the scars, both the physical scars from the ropes and the much deeper mental scars from the ultimate betrayal.
We've talked a lot about the monsters in this story. I want to end on the hero, because there were heroes here.
Absolutely. The 12-year-old boy, he saved his sister. He saved himself. Can you imagine the resilience, the sheer will to live it took to escape that house in that physical condition, climb a fence, navigate an unfamiliar neighborhood, and ask a stranger for help? He broke the cycle. He is the reason they are safe.
And the neighbors who didn't hesitate, they saw a child in need and they acted immediately. And the police officers who didn't back down when Jodi tried to bully and manipulate them at the door.
It's a reminder that the system can work, but it requires vigilance. It requires people to look past the perfect family image on YouTube, to look past the expensive house and to see the reality of what's in front of them.
And I think that's the big takeaway here for all of us. We are so used to curating our own lives online and to consuming the curated lives of others. We make these assumptions that if someone has a nice house and 1 million followers, they must be okay. We assume wealth equals stability and happiness.
But abuse loves a closed door, and it loves a shiny facade. Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke built the shiniest, most successful facade in all of Utah, and they used it to hide a literal dungeon.
This case is a warning shot. It really asks us a fundamental question. How do we distinguish between faith and manipulation? At what point does following counsel become surrendering your own humanity?
And on a systemic level, why do we allow so-called life coaches to operate with zero oversight, especially when they use spiritual language to bypass professional regulation? That is a massive regulatory failure that we need to address as a society.
These are the questions we need to keep asking. That's it for this deep dive. It was a heavy one, but an important one. Hug your kids and trust your gut.
And stay curious.
We'll see you next time.